Yeah, it's one of the themes of this interview.
Yes.
Just to know more or less to the Mexican people how South Africa nowadays, 2 decades after the end of the apartheid.
Yes, of course, it's only 2 decades after centuries.
Yeah.
People think it started with apartheid, the racism. It started in 1652 when somebody from the Dutch East India Company, a Dutchman, arrived at the Cape. That was the beginning of colonization. Anyway, I'll tell that to you when we're on sound.
Okay. So, we're going to begin this interview. Thank you very much for your time, Miss Gordimer. First of all, I want to start. Why did you choose the trench, the way of ideas, of words to struggle the apartheid regime?
I didn't choose it, it chose me. I'm born here, I grew up part of the white population, and came to realize very young what was wrong here. And then, of course, happened to get friendly with blacks, especially black writers, young and older black writers. And that was my sort of introduction to the fact that I had political responsibility. I always like to quote the French writer Albert Camus, who said, "The day that I am no more than a writer, I shall cease to be a writer." In other words, you have responsibility as a citizen of your own community, of your own country, and indeed a citizen of the world, to speak out in whatever way you can against oppression and racism.
Yeah. Can you describe us, for the Mexican people, how was the times of the apartheid? How were the times for the apartheid?
Well, it was a complete cut-off. Right, this was a prison for blacks, eh? But whites didn't realize a prison for them as well, because when you have no contact with your own people, you don't belong in the same country. It was as if they were 2 different countries. And for instance, if you had a black person working with you or for you, whether it was in an office or whether it was as a house help, then after 6 o'clock, for them to be in the town or suburban areas, they had to have a pass from the employer to say so-and-so is allowed to be out, you know. It was unbelievable. Blacks had no freedom at all. At the bank, at the post office, they stood in a separate queue.
Yeah. It was really bad times.
Terrible.
So, as a writer, as an author, can you describe us like your struggle, like your commitment with the South African people, with the black people?
Well, it came about, started very young. I was about 10 years old. Living in a small mining town with my parents, naturally in a white area, nothing very grand, just very ordinary. But like everybody else, we had a maid, a white maid, except that she was quite a middle-aged woman. She was a kind of second mother to me, the usual situation. And one night, my parents woke up, and so did I, because there was a noise going on. We came out, and we saw that in the garden, where her quarters were, it was full of police, black police in charge of a white policeman. And they had pulled out, turned over her bed, they had pulled out all her clothes, she was crying outside. It was a very common thing at the time. It was a raid for people who were brewing liquor illegitimately, because no black could go and buy a bottle of beer anywhere. So of course people brewed their own. And I don't know whether she did or not, probably she did, but fortunately that night she hadn't done it. Anyway, my parents, I stood with them, they stood there and they watched this happening. And then the police didn't find anything, so the white man called the black police off and they left. But young as I was, I began to think about this. They didn't come and call at the gate, they didn't knock at the door, it was private property. They just walked in and my parents did nothing. Didn't say, what do you want or anything. They just assumed, you know, this is how it is. That was, I would say, the very beginning of my realizing what was going on in this country.
That was the turning point.
Well, I think
For you?
it was the little push that made me think, you see. And then, of course, as I grew up and began to write and mix with writers, then I met young black writers who were, we were all learning to write, so to speak. The one in case became a very well-known man, Esquiampa, and who indeed then went into political exile for a while, taught in America and elsewhere, and came back. And there are others like him, you know, who became my friends, and with whom I had more in common than I had with the whites in my small town.
And describe us a little bit, how was the struggle of the ANC, of the black people, of your comrades, to struggle against the apartheid regime?
Well, I'm afraid you must read about it in their own words. But they all came to it in different ways. Well, of course, the main one was the African National Congress, which started off as the African Native Congress or something like that. Then it became the ANC under the initiative of a few people, but primarily Oliver Tambo and Nelson Mandela. Then there was the problem of, there were many blacks who had very naturally joined the Communist Party. It was a small Communist Party, which of course was banned, but still existed underground. But it came to a stage where the ANC, nationalistic, and the others, communistic, saw that they had common cause in many of the things here. So that many people, including friends of mine who had positions in the African National Congress, had also positions in the Communist Party. Not Mandela, but others.
The others,
yes.
A lot of sacrifice of all your comrades, of all the others.
They
of
all
course,
had.
Nelson Mandela sacrificed.
Then it began. He was one that we all know about, but there were others as well. And there was, considering the small white population, there were a number of white heroes and heroines. For instance, Brown Fisher and his wife, and his daughter, Ilse Fisher, who was here the other night. We had a little party. And an Afrikaans churchman, Beas Nordia, and a great friend of mine, a woman who influenced me greatly towards becoming more militant, was a woman called Betty du Toit, which of course is the Afrikaans pronunciation of du Toit, yes, from the Huguenot time here. And she was immensely brave. She was in and out of detention in prison. And that was my first experience as a little white bourgeois girl of going into a prison, because I found when I wanted to see her that only her family could go when she was in detention. This is detention without trial, which went on everywhere here. And so I thought, oh, I've got to get around this. So I went along to the office thing there and said, I'm so-and-so, and I'm the sister of Betty du Toit. They said, why have you got a different name? I said, of course, we're married, you know, women all change their names. And so I got the permission, and so for the first time in my life, I walked up to a prison and gave my credentials to the warder and visited her for the time that she was there, able to take her warm clothes and things like that.
So,
and later, with collaboration of friends in England, I was able to, she was forbidden to leave the country except on an exit permit. So I got her out, and she then spent some time overseas. First of all in Ghana, she was a trade unionist, and then unfortunately she got blind there from some infection caught when she was a great swimmer in the sea. So she went to England then to be treated and so on.
So then comes the liberation of Nelson Mandela, the elections, he became president, and it was the turning point for your country.
Yes, but I knew him before he became president. Now through a wonderful journalist, Anthony Sampson, an Englishman who came here and who was the first editor who created the first black magazine, meaning that it was staffed by black writers, Drum, which still exists. He got to know Mandela through interviews and so on, which was all done secretly. And he introduced me to Mandela, and then I attended both the big Mandela trials, the Rivonia trial and the final one, the treason trial, and was there when they pronounced the life sentence on him. Then when he was in prison, and I met him during the trial because my great lawyer friend, George Bezos, the famous George Bezos, pretended I was his clerk or assistant, and so I would carry some of his papers, and then at the break time he would go down to talk to the clients and I would trot along with him. So I got to know them there.
What was your first impression about Mandela when you met him?
Well, you know, he's always been such an impressive man. I mean, he was young then, very good looking, a naturally warm nature, and none of the feeling that, oh, I'm black and you're white and so we are enemies. He always saw that, and in himself, he saw that there was only one thing, and that was humanity. But that doesn't mean to say that you cannot fight for those who are behaving in an inhumane way. So all this was in one's meeting with him, but there was no sort of solemnity, you know, it was all very warm, friendly. And he was also someone with whom you could disagree, you could argue, which is always to me a sign of real intellect.
So, do you think
And then, of course, I met Winnie Mandela, his wife, his first wife, and then he was in prison, and through my friend Bezos, I had news of him from time to time. But as I have written somewhere else, prison walls do not a prison make, so far as he was concerned, that famous saying, because we were so conscious through those walls of his personality, and whatever little bits of news we got, we knew that the struggle was going on inside him. He was planning and somehow getting some things out to people. So you couldn't hold Mandela in, you know, you could lock him up, you could do anything, and you couldn't break his spirit. He had at times a very, very bad time there, heaven knows. But and at the same time, Winnie, people are not always aware of this, she had periods in prison and in detention. And then there was a great moment when he came out. As you know, first of all, he was on Robben Island for most of the 27 years, and then the last couple of years there was a prison on the mainland, sort of halfway house, where he was, and there she could see him. Whereas on the island she was allowed very few visits. But now they had some sort of beginning of coming back to normal life. And then he came out, it was on television, and to see him hand in hand with Winnie, this was absolutely wonderful.
And also with her
yes,
fist.
and so everybody was there. Then the next, I saw him a few times, and then the next big thing was he got the Nobel Peace Prize. It was a bit of a shock to us when we heard that F.W. de Klerk was going to be, not share it, he would get a Peace Prize, but it would be the same ceremony for both in Oslo. And it was a great honour and surprise to me. I was invited, along with George Bezos, to be in his entourage, his official entourage, Mandela's. And we went with him on the same plane, all very jubilant, it was lovely. And then there, of course, we were present, seeing him, the great moment, when indeed he was given the honour.
And all this atmosphere, can you describe those moments?
Well, they were so, you just couldn't believe it, you know. Come through Apartheid, and this somehow, that took so long, and this seemed to happen so suddenly. Of course it didn't, but it seemed to have. And then we had a strange experience. As I say, we were a bit fed up that de Klerk was sharing this. Mm-hmm. We were all, the entourage with Mandela and de Klerk, in the same hotel, Grand Hotel there. And the day after, or the next day after that, we were all called out onto the balconies of our rooms, the balconies all facing the same street, because there was an enormous procession of people, Scandinavians, some South Africans, people from all over, and they came along cheering, singing freedom songs and shouting, Amandla, Amandla, power, you know. And the balcony that I stood on with George, we looked, and at the next balcony was de Klerk and his wife, like this. And while the cheering and going on, of course it was all for Mandela, a little bit further along, we saw something astonishing. De Klerk and his wife turned their backs on the street and the crowd and went back into their room and closed the door. So this was, we thought, good Lord, how small-minded can you get? Yeah. You know, now we're supposed to have national unity, and they can't bear to see this man loved and applauded in this way for all that he did.
What does Mandela mean for South African people? To understand him?
Well, you know, there's this awful word, an icon. But he's not an icon. He's a man of flesh and blood. Yes, as he feels himself to be. And he feels himself at one with his people. And that means all of us in South Africa. But of course, especially toward his own people with whom he shared terrible times of racist oppression.
Yeah. And the most important thing for him was reconciliation.
Well, as I say, and that is why the behavior of de Klerk on the day that he was honoured seems completely against reconciliation.
In these 2 decades, the process of reconciliation has materialized at all in South Africa?
In some ways, I mean, one mustn't forget the laws have changed. If you're black, you can live anywhere you like. You can pursue any career, you can run any business, you can have a bank account and walk in there, you can do all the things, official things, that you could not do before. You can send your child to any school, you can go to any educational institution, and you can follow any profession that you like. One can't forget that. But the unfortunate thing is that this is something we who were in the struggle, whether modestly as I was or whether great heroes, such as some of my friends were, in exile and for years in prison and some on the island, we didn't have the peace of mind, to think what problems are there going to be after we attain freedom, with the whole history of not just apartheid, as I've said, of the colonial oppression from 1652. So from that to the 40s and 50s, a very long time. And it was all there. Black people were dispossessed of their land was taken from them, and they were kept, so to speak, caged from all the normal privileges and activities of the time under the colonialists. So now, of course, we see what we didn't think about, the problems that would come up, including the fact that I suppose we might have thought of, but we didn't, that people who have been oppressed like this, when they find themselves in position of power, when they find themselves as cabinet ministers or presidents, apart from, indeed, Mandela himself, and I will also add Mbeki, his successor, that apart from these two, particularly Mandela, the feeling of power is a kind of, it's a permanent state of being drunk on something, you know? Being high on something. Yes. So you then become terribly materialistic. You want everything that the oppressor has. But of course, in order to do that, you have to behave rather like the oppressor. And of course, that started the whole business of corruption and bribery, which unfortunately is so general now in our country between people in the government and financiers, black and white.
So do you think that all these things like greed, like corruption, have shattered the promise of the Rainbow Nation?
No, but you know, the Rainbow Nation is an idealistic thing, this visionary thing, but the Rainbow Nation is something that has to happen practically. And I think, right, if we're all supposed to live the same rainbow, we are living the same cloud at the moment, the same storm. And you know, the case of the president, the present president of Mr. Zuma, he was one of the heroes of corruption, of the resurrection of South Africa from apartheid. He spent time in prison, yes, but now he's doing all the things that he and others were fighting against. For instance, there's a big case against him over the arms deal, you know. And all these tenders, if you tendered to build a road or a school or something, and you go along to some member of the cabinet, you don't have to name any names, and right up to the top, and you know, the pocket is there for you to fill. And it's a very big pocket.
Yeah.
So this is the disillusion that we might have foreseen. But I suppose we didn't quite understand what power does to people who have been totally deprived of it and who feel that, I suppose, you can't get enough compensation for your people's suffering and your own. So we have to look at it in that light. Doesn't mean to say you excuse it, but there you are.
How do you see in the future, in the future years, South African people? Do you believe that this process of reconciliation will be materialized without all these issues?
We must try and see, the generations long following mine, that it doesn't take too long. And the sad part now is more and more in the last 2 years, it's blacks exploiting blacks.
Yeah.
There it is again. So all the things that whites did to them, they now do among themselves. And of course now young whites feel distant when a job is up and they have the same qualifications. Very naturally, in order to bring more change about, the position gives to a black man or woman.
Mm-hmm. Many white people feel discriminated nowadays.
There's some young people who I think they feel it because they are the ones who are affected.
Yeah.
Those of us whites who made our own lives and whatever compromises we need with being white in order to indeed be part of the total population, they are presented with a fait accompli, you know.
Yeah.
You belong to the minority of the minority. And when you consider the minority, what are we, something like whites, something like 10% of the total population. It's very small. On the other hand, if you look at the contribution of a few, ignore it, it'll be answered, on the answer phone. If you consider, out of that small population, the small but very effective group of whites who were part of the struggle, one's very thankful for that. Nobody can say that no whites did anything. You've got your Joe Slovers and Ruth Firsts, you've got Beyers Naudé, an Afrikaans dominee, you know, a churchman himself, and numbers of others, including my friend Betty du Toit that I've just mentioned.
So, I think, thank you very much for this interview.
No.
Something
I'd just
you
like
want
to say
to
one
add?
other thing.
Ah,
And that
yeah,
is,
of course.
I mean, you've gone through many troubles in your own country, in Mexico.
Yeah.
You know something of our problems here. And so we're very glad to be associated with you and with whatever happens in Mexico. It's close to us.
Thank you very much for that.
Welcome.
3, 2, 1.
Okay?
Yeah, we have common problems. No? I think, I don't know, in my personal point of view, they are like universal problems that join us, no? And if we know about your problems and how to solve them, we can share and be like more humans.
Of course.
No? We can be nearer.
And you have a certain problem, and when it occurs in our society, then at least we look at what you did to deal with it and the other way around. Oh, it's very important.
Very, very, very important.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And you
You're
know, we
very
have
kind.
the same kind of relationship with Cuba.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm one of the people
Yeah.
always campaigning for the the Cuban Five. All these things are difficult. This question now of Obama coming here, you know what's been happening. Yes. A big special Muslim group here. Yes. They don't want him to come here. And they say if he does come here, under some big international law, he must be arrested. You know why? Yes. So I don't know what's going to happen. In the meantime, it's been postponed for about a week. He isn't coming when he was supposed to. So, and it's such a strange situation because here he is a son of Africa. I mean, he's a Kenyan, and we all felt so delighted when you had a black-white, the mixture of the two, president in America. Anyway.
Anyway, yeah, and also in Mexico we have a very little black community,
I know, yes.
and Mexican people doesn't know that, and it's like.
Were they originally slaves brought from Africa? Yes.
Yeah. So it's important because it's part of our origins, of course, no, and we have to accept it now, and we have to celebrate.
But they've been there for years and they're accepted. Is there any intermarriage?
Mexico
With black and Mexicans?
No.
Because in the end, to me, that's the answer.
Really? The people have to start marrying each other?
Yes. I mean, here it was so forbidden, but of course it happened, or people went abroad and married.
Yeah.
And now, of course, people do as they like. I got a shock the first time I went for a walk in the park and saw the usual couple kissing, under the trees, and my God, here was a black man and a white woman. It was, I thought, well, they're going to be arrested, because people got arrested under the Immorality Act.
Yes.
The other day we saw
including
a couple.
a friend of mine, a Swedish writer, who met in this house at a party, a black man, and started an affair with him. And of course she was being watched, he was being watched, and so they saw him go to her flat, and oh dear. We had to arrange through the Swedish embassy here for her to quickly leave the country, otherwise she could have gone to prison too. Oh dear.
Wow.
Well, thank you very much.
Well,
You're very kind.
and all good luck to the future of Mexico,
Yeah, thank you.
and may we keep our connections going.
Of course.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.